The airport smelled like burnt coffee and goodbye. Camilla had been in enough of them to know that smell wasn't accidental. It was the smell of people holding things together by a thread, last hug stretched too long, shoes untied because nobody had the heart to bend down and fix them, children clutching stuffed animals with the grip of someone who already knew what separation felt like. She'd packed light, one suitcase, navy blue, the corners scuffed from 3 years of moving through cities that were never quite hers. London, then Lisbon, now this, a flight back to a life she'd spent 2 years carefully forgetting. She didn't check the departure board. She knew the gate. She knew the time. She'd been rehearsing this morning since 4 a.m., lying flat on the mattress of a sublet she'd stripped bare the night before, bed frame visible, walls naked where her prints had hung, every small proof of habitation erased like she'd been practicing disappearing for months, and today was finally the performance. Her phone buzzed. "You sure about this?" "Marcus, of course, Marcus." She stared at the message for longer than it deserved. Then she dropped the phone into her coat pocket and kept walking. The thing about Marcus was he asked questions he already knew the answers to. He'd been doing it for 2 years. "Are you happy here? Do you miss home? You sure about this?" He asked like the questions were kindness, like uncertainty was something she could be talked out of if he just phrased it gently enough. She was sure. She was terrified. Both of those things were true, and they lived in her chest like 2 cats in a carrier, loud, scratching, unable to get comfortable. The terminal was the long kind, the kind that made you feel like the gate was moving away from you as you walked. Families clustered near the windows. A toddler with a toy plane ran circles around a luggage cart, while his father watched with the exhausted tenderness of someone who hadn't slept since 2021. Camilla watched the toddler. Something moved in her. She looked away. The check-in queue was short. She'd timed it that way, late enough to skip the crowd, early enough to not be that person jogging to the gate with a boarding pass in their teeth. She wheeled her suitcase to the back of the line and stood, coat wrapped around her like armor, headphones around her neck but not in her ears. She never put them in her ears in airports. That was the rule. You missed too much. The man in front of her was traveling with what appeared to be his entire apartment. 4 bags. A garment bag draped over one arm like a sleeping child. He kept rearranging the stack with the frantic energy of someone whose morning had already defeated him, and every time he shifted one bag, 2 others threatened to collapse. She almost offered to help. She didn't. That was the other thing she'd been practicing. Not offering, not stepping into other people's disasters with both hands. Her therapist in Lisbon had a word for it, compulsive caretaking, and had said it with the clinical gentleness of someone who could see the whole shape of you from the outside. You take on other people's weight, Camilla, to avoid your own. She'd paid €120 a session for that insight, and it still made her want to argue. The queue moved. She moved with it. The woman at the check-in desk was somewhere in her 50s, hair pulled back, reading glasses on a lanyard, the expression of someone who had seen every variation of human travel chaos and had long since made peace with the whole enterprise. She took Camilla's passport with practiced efficiency, typed something, looked at the screen, typed something else. 1 bag to check. Just the one. The suitcase went onto the belt. Camilla watched it go with an irrational feeling she couldn't name, like watching something disappear into a river. She knew it would come out the other side. She knew that. And still. "Gate C14, the woman said. "Boarding in 40 minutes. "Thank you." She turned away from the desk. That's when she heard it. "Ma'am." Not loud, not sharp, just present, the kind of voice that expects to be obeyed. She turned. The security guard was young, mid-20s maybe, built like someone who took the job seriously, lanyard with a name she didn't catch from this distance. He wasn't looking at the check-in woman. He wasn't scanning the queue. He was looking directly at her. and he had his hand on her suitcase. The belt had stopped moving. Camilla stood very still. That's my bag," she said, stupidly. Obviously, the kind of thing you say when your brain hasn't caught up to the situation yet. "Yes, ma'am." He didn't let go. "I need you to step aside with me, please." End of part 1. The room they took her to was not a room so much as a decision. 4 walls, a folding table, fluorescent light doing what fluorescent light always does, which is make everyone look like they're one bad conversation away from a medical event. There were 2 of them now. The young guard, his badge said REYES, and a woman in a different uniform, older, with the particular stillness of someone who had seen people lie about everything and was no longer impressed by it. Camilla's suitcase sat on the table. Her coat was still on. She hadn't been asked to remove it. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs inside the pockets and focused on the pressure of her own palms. Ms. Vasquez, the woman, no badge visible, just authority worn like a second coat, set a printed sheet on the table without looking at it. "Do you know why you've been stopped?" "I don't." Flat true. The woman studied her the way people study receipts when the total doesn't look right. "Your bag flagged on the scanner before it was checked." Camilla looked at her suitcase. Navy blue, scuffed corners, the small brass lock on the front zipper she never used because the key had been lost somewhere in Lisbon for the better part of a year. "What did it flag for?" "We'd like to open it, with your permission." With your permission. The phrasing doing all the work of politeness while the room itself, the locked door, the table, the 2 of them, did the work of something else entirely. "Okay," Camilla said. Ray stepped forward and unzipped the main compartment. She had packed the way she always packed, obsessively, the kind of packing that other people found alarming when they saw it. Everything in compression bags, everything labeled in small masking tape strips, clothes rolled instead of folded, the whole interior organized with the precision of someone who had learned the hard way that disorder in a suitcase meant disorder in the mind, and she simply could not afford that. The woman looked at the contents. Ray's looked at the contents. There was a silence. Then Ray's reached into the side pocket, the small flat one Camilla used for documents mostly, and pulled out a manila envelope. Camilla's breath caught. Not dramatically. Not enough for either of them to see. Just a small interior snag, like a thread caught on a nail. The envelope was sealed, bulging slightly at one end. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she recognized the way you recognize a scar, not fondly, not with anger, just with the flat acknowledgement that it was there and it was permanent and it had always been there. Her mother's handwriting. She had not put that envelope in her bag. She knew she hadn't because she hadn't spoken to her mother in 14 months, and the last time she had it ended with a phone call that Camilla had ended mid-sentence by pressing the red button, and then sitting on the kitchen floor of her Lisbon apartment for 40 minutes doing nothing, just sitting, until the tiles got too cold and she had to stand up again. "Is this yours?" the woman asked. "It has my name on it." "That's not what I asked." Camilla looked at the envelope. She looked at it the way you look at something you want to understand but aren't sure you're ready to. "I didn't pack it," she said. "Someone else put it there." Ray's and the woman exchanged a look, not suspicious, more tired, the look of 2 people recalibrating. "When did someone else have access to your bag?" the woman asked. "Last night." The answer came before she decided to give it. "I was staying with a friend. The bag was in the hallway. I was packing until about midnight." She thought of Marcus. The way he'd hovered in the doorway of the bedroom while she folded things, not offering to help, just present, doing that thing he did where his silence was the loudest thing in the room. The way he disappeared into the kitchen at some point, and she'd been too tired to track where he went. She hadn't checked the side pocket. She never checked the side pocket. It was for documents, flat things, things that had their own order. "You think a friend put this in your bag," the woman said, not quite a question. "I think someone did." Another silence. Ray set the envelope on the table. The woman looked at it, then at Camilla. "We need to open it." "I know." They did. Inside was not contraband. Not anything that should have flagged a scanner. She still didn't understand what had flagged, and she suspected she never would. Suspected it had been something else entirely, some bureaucratic downstream event that had caught her name in its current and swept her here to this table in this room under this light. Inside was a letter, several pages, handwritten, and underneath the letter, tucked flat, was a photograph. Camilla and her mother. The photograph was old, Camilla maybe 7 or 8, in a yellow coat she remembered with a vividness that startled her, standing in front of a car she didn't recognize, squinting into the sun. Her mother standing next to her with one hand on Camilla's shoulder and an expression Camilla had never seen in real life. Soft, unguarded, the expression of someone who didn't know a camera was pointed at them. Her mother never looked like that when she knew someone was watching. The woman slid the letter and photo back into the envelope. She held it out. "Everything appears to be in order," she said, which was both true and the most inadequate sentence Camilla had heard in recent memory. She took the envelope. It weighed nothing. It felt like picking up a stone from the bottom of a river, dense with everything it had absorbed, cold in ways the temperature didn't explain. "You're free to go," Ray said. She walked out of the room. The terminal was exactly as she'd left it. The toddler with the toy plane had moved on. The fluorescent light out here was warmer, or it felt warmer, which was close enough. Her gate was down the corridor, past the duty-free and the overpriced pharmacy and the small row of chairs always occupied by people sleeping in positions that would cost them tomorrow. She sat down in one of the empty chairs. She held the envelope in both hands. She did not open the letter. End of Part 2. Gate C14 was boarding in 11 minutes. Camilla knew this because the screen above the gate said so, and because her body had always been its own departure clock. The low hum in her sternum that started when time was running short, the way her fingers went slightly numb, old machinery that had been calibrated by too many last-minute things in too many places. She still had the envelope. She'd moved twice since leaving the security room, once to the pharmacy, where she'd bought a bottle of water she hadn't drunk and a packet of painkillers she didn't need, the kind of transaction that was purely about having something to do with her hands, and once to a seat 2 rows closer to the gate, which felt like progress without being progress. The water sat unopened on the seat beside her. Her phone buzzed again. She looked. Not Marcus this time. Her sister. A voice note, 37 seconds. The kind of message that announced itself by length before you even listened. A 37-second voice note from Sophia could be anything from "call me when you land" to "mom is in the hospital." Camilla pressed play. "Hey," Sophia's voice close to the mic, the slight echo of a kitchen behind her. "I know you're boarding soon. I wanted to tell you something before you got on the plane." A breath, the kind of breath that's doing work. "She wrote you a letter, Cam. She gave it to Marcus like 3 weeks ago and asked him to, I don't know, find a way to make sure you got it before you left. I know that's insane. I know you're going to be furious. But she asked me if she should send it and I said yes. And I need you to know that. Because if you're furious, I want you to be furious at the right people." A pause. "She's sick. It's not an emergency. But she wanted you to know before you got home. She didn't want it to be a thing you walked into at the door." 37 seconds. Camilla sat with the voice note silence after it ended, the silence of a message that had delivered everything it came to deliver and was now simply waiting to be held. She looked at the envelope. The photograph had her in a yellow coat. She remembered that coat. She remembered the zip pull was shaped like a star, and one of the arms had broken off and she'd cried about it for a week. One of those childhood griefs that seem disproportionate until you understand that children cry about small things because the large ones haven't happened yet, and small things are all they have for practice. Her mother had kept that photograph. For how long? Through how much? Through 14 months of silence and the phone call she'd ended mid-sentence, and every Christmas Camilla had spent in cities that were never quite hers. She thought about all the things she'd been rehearsing this morning. The stripped apartment, the erased walls, the whole project of disappearing cleanly. She opened the envelope. The letter was 7 pages, her mother's handwriting, which had always looked like it was slightly in a hurry, like the pen was trying to keep up with a brain that had already moved ahead. Camilla read the first line. She stopped. She breathed. She started again. She read the whole thing sitting in gate C14, with the boarding announcement going overhead and a child behind her asking his father why the plane was so big, and the father saying so it can carry everything it needs, and that being, unfortunately, the most on-the-nose thing she'd heard in recent memory. The letter did not apologize in the way she had imagined an apology, which is to say it wasn't clean or simple or the kind of thing that arrived with a bow on it, and resolved everything the way a story was supposed to resolve. It was messier than that. It was her mother, all of her, the difficult geometry of her, the ways she loved that looked like control, the ways she feared that looked like anger, the ways she was sorry that came out sideways for most of Camilla's life, and had apparently, at some point in the last year, started to learn how to come out straight. I don't know if you'll read this. I asked Marcus because I thought you might have thrown it away if it came from me, and I didn't think I could stand that. Maybe that's still control. Your therapist would probably say it is. Mine says it's fear. I'm not sure those are different things. Camilla's flight began to board. She didn't move. You were wearing that yellow coat the day I took the photo. You'd had a nightmare the night before and I didn't handle it right. I told you to stop being dramatic when what you needed was for me to sit down on the floor with you. I've thought about that so many times. You were 6. You just needed someone to sit on the floor with you. The gate agent was scanning passes. The line was thinning. I'm not asking you to forgive me for things I haven't earned forgiveness for. I'm asking you to come home knowing that I am trying, in the only way I know how, which is late and imperfect, and yours if you want it. Camilla looked up. The gate agent, a young woman with the practiced calm of someone who handled last boarding passengers the way you handled any emergency, which was with total apparent serenity, caught her eye. Last call for this flight, ma'am. Camilla stood. She put the letter back in the envelope. She put the envelope in her coat pocket, the one she kept her hands in when she was holding herself together. She picked up the unopened water and dropped it in the bin by the gate. She walked through. The jetway was the long kind, slightly downhill, the kind that felt like the airport releasing you into something rather than you leaving it. Ahead of her, the plane waited with the patient enormity of something that had been doing this its whole life. She thought about what she was flying toward. Not what she'd imagined, not the clean return of an erased person, not the resolution she'd been rehearsing. Something more complicated. Something with 7 pages of her mother's handwriting and a photograph from when she was 6 and a doctor's appointment she'd only just found out about, and a sister who told her the hard things because no one else would. She thought about the therapist in Lisbon. You take on other people's weight, Camilla, to avoid your own. Maybe, or maybe weight was just the word for love when love got too heavy to carry lightly. Maybe you didn't put it down. Maybe you just got better at carrying it. The plane was big, the way all planes were big. So it can carry everything it needs. She found her seat. She buckled in. She put the envelope on her lap with both hands flat on it, the way you'd hold something alive. Outside the window, the tarmac was gray and wide, and the morning was still deciding what kind of day it wanted to be. She let it decide. She was going home. End of part 3. Departure drama. Guard halts Camilla and grabs her suitcase in a shocking scene. A complete.